Hi everyone, Fabrizio Cross here. Today I'm going to go over the basics of tire replacement and repair on the current version of the Electrom, which is using the new clamping torque arm, because there's a couple of these bikes out there now and I haven't yet made this video, so I thought it was time to do so. So first of all, I want to show you all what I carry on board for a toolkit for on the road, and this is just the basics of what you need to repair a flat tire on the Electrom on the road. Okay, so number one, I have a portable stand that just opens up. This one's just made out of plywood, and this is used to keep the back wheel off the ground while you're changing the tire. And then in my repair kit, I have a replacement tube. The tubes that are inside the Electrom have been pre-filled with a self-healing tire slime, and this will prevent small leaks from draining your tire. However, it does mean if you have a really big rupture, it makes it really difficult to patch them because that slime really interferes with the patch. So I do recommend carrying a replacement tube with you at all times, because it's really a much easier way to do it while on the road. And this tube size is a 2.5 to 2 3/4 16-inch wheel, which is 16-inch motorcycle. In the bicycle world, that would be a 20-inch tube. And so you can see these numbers here, 2.75 by 16. So that's basically the exact tire that we're running. If you're in a tight spot, any large air volume 20-inch BMX tube will work, but I like these ones that I get from a motorcycle and scooter shop because they're a thicker rubber and much more durable. This is the T20 Torx driver. You will need this to get the swing arm covers off so that you can get at the bolts and the disc brakes. Here we have a crescent wrench, and I like to keep an adjustable wrench on board for all kinds of little nuts and bolt stuff, but the key thing here is this wrench will open up to 25 millimeters because the nuts on the Electrom rear axle are a 21 millimeter nut, so you need to be able to open it up wide enough. To change your tire, you will need a metric Allen key set, and in fact I always carry a metric Allen key set on me on any bicycle because it is the most commonly needed tool. And then this is a portable battery powered pump, and this is much more compact than an actual floor pump, which is what you'll need to re-air up your tire. These are quite nice. Basically this threads in here, you're good to go there. Now, also in the bag with the pump, I carry a valve extender. And this is helpful because on the rear wheel, the hub gets in the way of attaching the pump to the valve. And so this is a 90-degree valve extender that allows me to attach this to the Schrader inner tube valve, like so. And that allows me to get the pump onto here without having to contort it through awkward angles. And then this is just the little charging cable for the pump. And then finally, we have a set of aluminum motorcycle tire levers. You can also use heavy-duty plastic mountain bike tire levers. These are what I use because I like to make sure that I've got something that won't break. Okay, so just going back over what we have. We have a large jaw adjustable wrench or crescent wrench. We have a T20 driver for removing the swing arm covers. We have an Allen key set for all of the various Allen key work that we'll need to do, and this is a metric Allen key set. We have a set of aluminum motorcycle tire levers. We have our battery powered electric pump, and inside of here is our 90-degree valve extender and a replacement tube. That's the bare basics of what I feel every Electrom repair kit should have. And then, of course, we also want to make sure that we have our something. And in my case, I'm using this plywood construct. We want to have our thing that will allow us to lift the back wheel off the ground so that we can get at the wheel. And now let's do a change, and I'll show you how it works. Howdy, folks. So let's talk about how to change the rear wheel if you have a flat tire on your Electrom. I'm going to take this wheel off and show you how to change the tire and the tube, and then how to put back on. All right, so we'll lay out all of our parts, and the first thing we'll want to do is put the bike up on a stand. So to do this, grasp the bike underneath the rear tail box, and I'm actually going to move it over this way a little bit. And I'll put my stand in place. And lift the bike up and onto the stand. And that will get me the height I need to let the wheel drop down. Then, using my T20 driver, I'll remove the bolts that hold the swing arm covers in place. You want to make sure you've got a place to put all these things. And in my case, I'm going to put my bolts inside of the swing arm covers. I'll go over to the other side and do the other side. So we now have access to our wiring and our disc brake. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo the wiring harness down here and undo the disc brake. And the reason we removed the disc brake is it actually makes it a lot easier to get the wheel back on once we've done a repair. So here's our wire, and this is a simple undo and pull apart. Now, because we're undoing our disc brake, it does mean we will have to realign the disc brake after we put the repaired wheel back on. However, though that is a little bit of extra work, it is still a much easier way to do this than to try to fit the wheel on into the dropouts while navigating through. So I'm going to put all my bolts in here. So yeah, basically it's much easier to have the disc brake out of the way when we're putting the wheel back on, because this way we can just slip it into these dropouts and we're not having to negotiate dealing with it coming through the disc brake and the dropouts at the same time. Okay, on the other side, we have a couple of other things to do. This is our torque arrestor, and to take it off, we will need to undo and on my bike, the bolt is going into a 10 millimeter nut, so I will have to put a backing wrench on that nut. On new bikes, it just goes right into the frame, so you don't have to hold this nut steady. So we're undoing this nut, I think. And be careful not to lose any of these bolts and nuts. And something else I will do here is I'm going to take the chain and just get it off of the cassette and let it drop down in between, because this will make it easier There we go. Having that chain down there out of the way will just make it easier for me to get the wheel off. So we've disconnected our disc brakes. We've disconnected our motor cable on the far side. And we've undone our torque arrestor attachment. I'm going to loosen the torque arrestor itself off. And this is a little set of bolts that basically clamp down the axle and prevent the axle from torquing back and forth while under regen braking forces. Then I'll open my disc, my crescent wrench off, and this will be done up fairly tight, so I'll have to use a fair amount of force to get that going. And once we've opened it up, that's good. I don't need to take this all the way off, but I do need to open it up fairly wide because that'll make putting it back on easier. And then on the left side, we'll do the same thing. So, that's it. Our wheel is now ready to drop out. Out it comes. Now that the wheel is off of the dropouts, I can take the chain and get it out and away from our cassette. That's how we get the wheel off of the bike. And next we'll cover how to change out that flat and then how to put the wheel back on the bike. We have our flat tire here and we are ready to pull it apart. Now, even though this is a flat tire, I'm still going to be very careful to not pinch the inner tube with my tire spoons. One of the things that's important to know about dealing with wide rims and big heavy-duty tires is that the more room you can give yourself, the better your situation will go. So what I'm doing is I'm undoing the lock nut that holds my inner tube down. I'm doing it right up to here, and then I'm going to push the inner tube into the tire. And what this will do is this will allow more space between the valve stem and the edge of the rim, which gives me more space in order to get this tire off. Most tires actually have a fair amount of wiggle room on them. And so if we can free up all that wiggle room, you can almost pull these off by hand, but not quite. So that's where my tire levers come in. So I'm just going to slip a lever in and pull it out, and I'll rotate the wheel a bit, and I'll slip another lever in and pull it out. And now I can basically just work my way along with the tube and get this tire off. And I do want to be careful, once again, not to pinch that tube. It's just a good habit to get into, even if you're dealing with an already flat tube. Good habit to get into, to pay attention to where that tube is and make sure you're not going to pinch the tube with your tire lever. Okay, so I now have my tire free. I'm going to finish undoing this valve nut, and this is the tricky part. It's just pushing up and out so we can pull this tube out. Okay, so that's our old tube out. Okay, I'm ready to resume. Now, those of you who are paying attention probably notice this is a different wheel than what I took off. I was running an experimental wheel on the bike, and it's been interesting, but it's time to change back to the regular Electrom wheel, which is the 9 Continents 212. So that's what we have here. And this one's all nice and cleaned up, ready to go. And I thought as long as I was doing a tire change, I might also cover how to install a new tire from scratch, including a new tube. So we'll also be covering that in this video. And one of the things I've done is I've gone and gotten a block of wood to put down just so that my threads don't get in the dirt. If you are working on a concrete surface, make sure that your axle nuts are backed out enough that the threads of the axle itself are protected from getting abraded or smashed by the concrete. So basically, by having the axle nut backed out enough, it will prevent that from happening. I want to check the tire rotation direction, and I know that this is spinning clockwise, so I want to make sure the tire is also spinning in the correct direction. To mount a new tire, pretty straightforward. We basically just find the groove, give ourselves lots of room, and there, it's halfway on already. Unfortunately, that first half is the easy part. Now we install our tube, and this one of the things I like to do is I like to pre-inflate the tube with a little bit of air, just so that it will help it hold its shape, and that will help prevent it from getting pinched between my tire levers when I'm putting it in. If this tube was fully compressed and flat and floppy, then it would more likely that one of these little flaps would get caught between a tire lever and get pinched and cause a hole, which we don't want to happen. So the trickiest part of this whole thing is getting your valve stem in and through the valve stem hole on the tire. And I wish I could say there was an easy way to do it, but there really isn't. You've basically got to maneuver it up and into place. And using your fingers I'm going to put the whole tube into the tire before I put the valve stem in. Sometimes I find that helps free up some space and give me room to work. I suspect a little pair of needle nose pliers would probably be helpful in this situation, but as I don't carry those in my repair kit, I'm going to try to do it without. So I'm just maneuvering my fingers. I felt in there, and there we go. I've got the valve stem in and through. Now, I am not going to do it all the way up with my valve stem nut. I'm just going to put this on to make sure the valve doesn't slip back out, but I won't dial it all the way down. So, like so, I've got it on just enough to hold everything in place. Okay, so we've got our valve stem in, and I've got our valve stem retainer nut done up, but as I said before, it's just done up enough to prevent the valve stem from slipping back out, and we want this because we want to have the space between the valve stem and the tire to get our tire on. So now I'm going to make sure that my tire is out of the way, and I like to start actually at the valve stem, and using finger strength I will push the tire into place. And I'm just pushing the tire in. Now this is what we got to look out for. We got to make sure that that tube doesn't get pinched either between the tire and the rim or between a tire spoon and the rim. And it really wants to, but I'm not going to let it. And that's why as much of this as you can do with your fingers, the better. So now I'm going to push this valve stem up so that I know that this tire can get nice and seated and that the tube isn't getting in the way. And that should give me the slack I need to get our tire on. And there we go. So our tire's on now. Now I can do up this valve stem nut and rotate the tire a little bit. One of the things that's important to do is to make sure that your tire and tube are proper in relation to each other. And what that means is before you put air in the tire, you see how the tire can move back and forth in relation to the rim? And that puts a bend or a kink in the valve stem. So I'm going to move this tire until I see the valve stem is coming straight through the tube and or through the rim and not bent on an angle. And for some reason, this valve stem nut is being a little bit difficult. So I'll use my crescent wrench just to coax it along a little bit. Now I'll attach my valve stem extender. Set up our pump. And on mine, I have to press and hold the button to get it to power on. Now it's on. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is I am just going to add a little bit of air to this tire because I want to work my way around and properly seat the tire. If you look here, you can see we've got a lot of this vertical striped area showing up above and very little showing down below on the bottom of the wheel. And if I was just to air this right up, I would have a big bulge in my tire at the top here. So what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of air, properly seat the tire in the rim, add a little bit more, go around and double check, and then once I'm confident that the tire is properly seated in the rim, then I can bring it up to full pressure. So first I'll add a bit of air. Okay, so I've got some air in the tire and I'm just going to work my way around and check. And what we're doing is we're looking to see that this stripe is relatively uniform all the way around the tire. And we can see how there's a little bit more bulging out. So I'm going to push this in and pull out on the corresponding section that's perhaps a little bit more embedded. And we will need to do this on both sides just to confirm that everything's good. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to add some more tire pressure. These pumps aren't terribly fast, but it's still a lot more fun than pumping yourself. Okay, so I'm now at about 3 psi, which means I have enough pressure on the side of the tire between the tire and the rim that it will hold position. And I can work my way around and double check everything. Add extra seat. There we go. It looks pretty good. Okay, now I'll carry on. And I'm going to bring this tire all the way up now to about 40 pounds per square inch. That seems to be about a good pressure. If I'm going for a long trip on the highway, then I will be running at about 45 psi. Okay, so I've taken it up to 45 pounds per square inch, and I am going to undo my pump. Undo my valve stem extender. And put my valve stem cap back on. Okay, now we are ready to put this tire back on the bike. Now we're ready to put this wheel back on the bike. Okay, here we go. We're ready to put this wheel back on the bike, and there's a couple of things that I need to point out. We need to have our washers in the correct locations in order to get onto the bike. So our wheel has, on the drive side, we have a little washer that wants to be on the inside of the dropout, and then on the outside we just have the torque arrestor. And then on the disc brake side we have a washer that wants to be on the inside and a larger washer that wants to be on the outside of the dropout. And when I say dropout, I mean this part of the bike. This is the dropout of the bike. And this is actually one of the hardest parts of this maneuver, is getting this wheel up into this location, because the wheel's kind of heavy and it's fitting into these dropouts, and there's all kinds of finicky little stuff going on. We want the motor cable to be exiting out of the back of the cable, and the axle is slotted, as are the dropouts, so we want to make sure that that slot is prearranged to be at about the right angle. All right, let's see if we can get this on. Okay, so the first thing I'll do is bring the wheel all the way forward in the swing arm so that I can reach down and grab this chain and maneuver it onto the freewheel. It's awkward, but it is possible. There, with the chain in place, that will make getting the wheel on much easier. And we do need the chain in place before we start, because if the chain is not in place and we put the wheel on, we'll just have to take the wheel off again to get the chain in place. Now, I will pull the torque arrestor out and make sure that Now I'll pull the torque arrestor out and make sure this inner washer is in. And the same on the other side. I will make sure this inner washer is on the inside and our outer washer on the outside. Now comes the difficult part, which is getting the wheel up and into place. And I'm going to have to get right in there. I'm going to have my crescent wrench already sized for my nut, because one of the things I'm going to want to do is put a little bit of tension on that nut as soon as I get it up into place to hold the wheel in place. And this is really easiest if you just get right in there. Okay, got my axle nut clear on one side, And watching my fingers, there, wasn't too bad. So I've got my wheel up in place. I'm going to do up this nut, and I'm just going to put a little bit of tension on it so that the wheel doesn't fall out when I remove my strength. There we go. Okay, now that this wheel is in place, I'm going to take the bike down off of the stand because I want to apply down pressure from the swing arm onto the wheel to make sure that the wheel is properly seated up and in its dropout locations. So now we have the weight of the bike on the wheel and the axle. I'm going to loosen this back off again just to make sure that it sits up, and you see how the wheel did a little bit of moving there because it wanted to move further up into the dropouts. And now I'm going to tighten up my axle nuts. I won't try to do one up all the way. I will do this one up just till I feel a bit of resistance. And then on the far side, before I go any further, it's time to attach my torque arrest. And I may need to loosen the other side back off because I may need to wiggle this torque arrest around a little bit to get it to pass through the hole. You can see the hole there. Pass my bolt through. He said hopefully. Sometimes by backing this off a little bit I can create a little bit of slack. There we go. And in my case I have to put on this backing nut, but on all of the new bikes there is actually a tapped hole in the dropout, so it doesn't require a backing nut. Go. And now I will do up my torque arrest bolts, and this is a clamping torque arrest. This is made by Grin Technologies out of Vancouver. This is a great product. It is really what you want to have if you're using a direct drive rear wheel, because it makes sure that you don't get axle rotation under regenerative braking. And this torque arrest is doing the majority of the work in preventing the axle from rotating under acceleration and under braking. So though I want these axle nuts to be done up tight, they don't have to be outrageously tight. Now, I've got my axle done up nice and tight. Do it on both sides. Next, we will put our chain back on, and that's as simple as just lifting it on and rolling backwards. Now, back on the disc brake side, it's time to reattach our disc brake, and also fairly straightforward. Put it into place. Put in the bolts. And before I tighten these bolts right down, I'm going to do a check and make sure my disc brake gets aligned. To do that, I'll put the bike back up on the stand. Whoops. Came off the... So, to align my disc brake, I'll spin the wheel. I will listen for rubbing. Visually check, and then once I'm happy with where it is, I will tighten up these Allen keys. And while I'm here, I always like to double check and make sure that all of these bolts are nice and tight. So we've got our disc brake all done up. Now we will attach our motor cable. We have a keeper nut there to do up. One of the things you always want to make sure of is that this cable is not in danger of rubbing on your disc brake, because if it does, you will wear through the cable and cut one of your wires, and then everything will come to a halt. Now I'll attach my keeper Velcro. Some of you will have Velcro, some of you will have a zip tie here. And there we go, and I'm making sure that this is not in danger of running on there. Now I'll go on the other side and reattach this swing arm cover. And last but not least, it's time to put on the final swing arm cover, and then we're done. And the swing arm covers, what we're aiming for are these two nuts that are threaded in, and sometimes it's a little challenging to line them up. If you can get one lined up and started, and I can see the hole through here. And you do want to be careful because these are stainless steel bolts going into aluminum. If you go too tight, you can strip the threads. Although on some of your bikes, I will have attached what are called press nuts, so you won't have that problem. So I'll do a little hunting around here till I can find my spot. There it is. Okay, that's it. Our back wheel is back on, our axle nuts are done up tight, our motor cable is attached, our torque arrestor is attached, our disc brake is back on and tightened right down, and finally our swing arm covers are on. And that's basically all that you need to know about changing a back tire on an Electrom.